with tourists and children strolling past.
This is a bit startling.
The Army says the National Guard troops will support local law enforcement and that some have been directed to maintain a presence at national monuments. But that's an area of the nation's capital where crime has been generally low. City officials say the troops will be unarmed, but an Army official said they will have access to their weapons just stored elsewhere nearby. The Guard deployment comes the day after President Trump declared a temporary federal takeover of the D.C. Police Department, a move D.C.'s mayor called an authoritarian push and an intrusion of the district's autonomy. Attorney General Pam Bondi, who President Trump says is now in charge of the D.C. Metropolitan Police Department, met with Mayor Muriel Bowser.
What I'm focused on is the federal surge and how to make the most of the additional officer support that we have.
Crime in the district has been trending downward, with violent crime down 26% from last year and the homicide rate down 11%. President Trump is also vowing to clean up the Capitol and get homeless people off the streets.
Homeless individuals will be given the option to leave their encampment, to be taken to a homeless shelter, to be offered addiction or mental health services, and if they refuse, they will be susceptible to fines or to jail time.
President Trump's decision to order a federal takeover of the Washington, D.C. Police Department is unprecedented. It is also limited. Under federal law, he can only do it for 30 days unless Congress authorizes a longer takeover. As for that National Guard deployment, there is no such time limitation on that. Diane?
All right, John Carl, thank you. And President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance will meet virtually today with Ukraine's President Zelensky and European allies. Zelensky is urging allies to, quote, force Russia to make peace, saying Vladimir Putin is showing no sign he intends to end the war in Ukraine otherwise. We're also learning more about Friday's planned summit between Putin and President Trump. Chief Global Affairs correspondent Martha Raddatz is in Washington with the latest. Hi, Martha.
Diane, Vladimir Putin says he wants peace in Ukraine, but this morning he is clearly trying to get an advantage on the battlefield as he heads into Friday's historic meeting.
A bold new Russian offensive. This video circulating online showing an explosion and plumes of smoke as Russia advances into a Ukrainian stronghold in the east. This comes as officials confirm that today Ukrainian President Zelensky and European allies will meet virtually with President Trump and Vice President Vance, 2 days before Trump's face-to-face meeting with Vladimir Putin in Alaska, which the White House is now calling simply a listening exercise.
The president is agreeing to this meeting at the request of President Putin. And the goal of this meeting for the president is to walk away with a better understanding of how we can end this war.
Trump himself downplaying expectations as well.
I think it'll be good, but it might be bad. Probably in the first 2 minutes, I'll know exactly whether or not a deal can be made.
Trump had wanted a trilateral meeting that included Zelensky, but Putin rejected that.
Putin doesn't want Zelensky around that table because that would reveal that he actually doesn't want to negotiate. And he just wants to have a picture with President Trump and also postpone sanctions.
Photo ops are not always successful. In the president's first term, his Hanoi summit with North Korea's Kim Jong-un ended abruptly with no progress in stopping Kim's nuclear programs. And for this upcoming meeting with Putin, even if there is progress, the president suggests any path to peace will require Ukraine to give up territory, something President Zelensky has flatly said will not happen without security guarantees.
And Zelensky saying this morning that there is no sign that the Russians are preparing to end the war, and all countries that want peace should force Russia to make peace. Diane?
Martha Raddatz, thank you. And for more, let's bring in ABC News national security and defense analyst Mick Mulroy. Mick, what would a successful meeting look like for Zelensky today?
So if President Zelensky, Diane, is able to convince President Trump, one, to be the advocate for Ukraine, not simply a message carrier, but also exactly what Ukraine is willing to concede when it comes to ending this war and what they would expect in return, which would likely be ironclad security assurances to include probably entrance into NATO, but certainly having NATO forces move into Ukraine. But it's important to note that President Zelensky can't actually agree to concede territory to Russia. That actually, under the Constitution of Ukraine, has to be a referendum of the people of Ukraine. But it's very important today that President Trump understands what at least President Zelensky believes the Ukrainian people are willing to do and what they're willing to do and have in return. Those are two key elements that he needs to take into this meeting on Friday, or this could just be a way for President Putin to extend this conflict without any consequences, avoiding, again, the secondary sanctions that the U.S. has promised to put on them if they continue.
Now, Russian forces are advancing into Ukrainian-held territory in the east right now. Zelensky says Putin's trying to partition Ukraine. How do you think that'll factor into the meetings today and on Friday?
Well, if President Putin thinks he is making advances, and he is, he's taken over some key terrain. It's incremental, and he's losing thousands of soldiers a day, which he doesn't seem to care. But if he thinks he's making gains in going toward the overall objective of taking Ukraine, he's likely not going to concede to anything other than his maximalist positions, which is essentially designed to look like it's a ceasefire negotiation, but essentially delay the inevitable, which we hope is the inevitable, which is these secondary sanctions, which could cut off the supply of funds that President Putin needs to fund his war in Ukraine. But if this is essentially the same maximalist position that he had before, it's unlikely that this will advance at all the ceasefire negotiations.
Zelensky this morning called on his allies to force Russia into peace. How much power do the U.S. and European allies have to actually do that?
We do have power. One, the secondary sanctions, and if you look at the bill in the Senate, it is a 500% tariff on countries that purchase energy from Russia. So China, India, Turkey. If they stop purchasing energy from Russia, that's it. They essentially have a one-track economy in its energy, and if they can't sell it, they can't make enough money to fund the war. There's also all this frozen assets, mostly in Europe, that can be released in tranches that would help Ukraine purchase, say, U.S. weapons systems that they need to actually go on the offensive and start taking back terrain. So there's a lot of things that the U.S. and Europe can do together that would actually change the perspective, I think, of President Putin, where he'd want a ceasefire because he can't gain the territory that he set out to gain in the first place.
Trump has also said that he's open to holding a trilateral meeting with Zelensky and Putin down the line. Do you expect that to happen anytime soon?
Well, Diana, it really depends on how these discussions go on Friday. If the Russians stay with their maximalist demands, then it's time that we literally, our bluff has been called. We have to do something. We have to put in secondary sanctions and start releasing tranches of frozen funds. If not, there's really nothing else that we can do to the Russians. If the Russians do start, and there is some hope that they do want a ceasefire, then the only way to actually get to the agreement would be to add President Zelensky, who needs to one, agree with it, and then take it back and essentially sell it to the Ukrainian people. Because, again, he can't unilaterally decide to cede territory of Ukraine. Under the Constitution, that is a referendum of the Ukrainian people. So he needs to be able to sell that, whatever he does agree to his own people to make this a reality.
All right, Mick Mulroy, always great to have you. Thank you.